Welcome, friends. You're just here in time to hear a story. My son over there has just asked, what did I do in the war? Yeah, it had been 2 cold, wet summers. Things don't change much, do they? And there wasn't much food, and there wasn't much money. And I remember the day the Duke's factor turned up like it was yesterday. He was offering good money. He needed to raise a company of 20 men to go to France with the King. And my wife didn't want me to go. I was fit there. 3 days later, I was at Peveril Castle. Met the other men-at-arms. There was about 15 archers like me, and 5 men-at-arms, old soldiers, in rather rusty and bent armour. We were given our orders. We had to meet the Duke at the Tower of London in 10 days' time. We were given horses, and off we went. London. Never been more than a day's ride from where I ever lived. Still, we went. Wasn't a nice trip. It was wet that summer too. And we spent our time living in barns and underneath hedges to try and save a bit of money. And it took us 2 weeks to get there. We were late. Still, we got to the top of a hill one day, and there, all of a sudden, was London stretched out in front of us. It was enormous. Biggest place I'd ever seen. And it stank. It was covered in smoke from thousands of fires all over everywhere. And the road stank of dung. There were herds of horses and cattle and flocks of geese and sheep all being driven to market. And the streams were smelling like a tannery. And we seemed to walk for miles through all these narrow, damp, smelly streets. God, I'd hate to live in London. Still, we couldn't miss the tower into Canterbury, going to pay at Becket's grave and at Becket's tomb. They'd made some sort of funny deal with the innkeeper there. He was going to accompany them all, and he was going to pay for the trip there and back, provided all the pilgrims entertained him with stories. And the best storyteller was going to get a slap-up meal when they got back. There was a right mixture of people there too. There was this big, fat woman from the West Country somewhere, Bath, I think. She'd had 4 husbands and was looking for another on this trip. God knows what husbands died of, but there we go. Yeah, but she wasn't very happy. The men in this group were a rather mixed bunch. There was a knight. He was quite gentlemanly and chivalric and kind and moneyed, but he was a bit old and he was very dressed in black, like a lawyer or a scribe or something. Didn't say much, but he was scribbling notes all the time. People were telling stories, and he's sticking the bits of parchment, hiding them in his cloak somewhere. So, it was a wonderful trip. Remember it as long as I live. We talked a lot, and we drank. Lots of stories on the way on horseback and in the taverns afterwards. And there was music too, and dancing. Yes, I know I look at Pratt. I probably looked at Pratt when he aboard his ship, but I was enjoying myself. We all joined in and settled ourselves on board. Yeah. God, I hate boats. Especially the first time. It went up and down and side to side, round and round, and I was sick as a pig all the way across. Mind you, it didn't help. We were one of the first boats to cross. We saw that white cliffs first, like at Dover, but then they soon petered out into long, long beaches backed with dunes. And on one of these beaches, all the ships were starting to be run aground. And as an archer, I was ordered off first to get to the top of the beach to stand guard. All of a sudden, I wasn't seasick. I was sick with fear. Jumping off the side of the boat, my legs could hardly support me. Running up the beach, we were expecting cavalry charges and crossbow bolts. But all that reached us was the sound of seabirds and the sound of wind in the grasses in the dunes. Still, after a few hours, there were enough mounted knights to go out on patrol, and us archers were ordered back to help unload the ships. God, that was a job. 1,600 boats, 10,000 fighting men, at least another 10,000 men to support us all, 60,000 horses, 600 two-horse wagons, and everything. All the locals had gone into the town of Harfleur, about 10 miles down the coast. So that was what the king was going to do. This was going to be his first major battle. And he'd give the king another bloody nose, and that would be it. That wasn't going to happen. Soon as we saw the town, this was going to be a big fight. It had big walls, big towers. The River Somme flowed down one side, the sea was on the other, and the French had dammed a stream on the other, and there was a great big lake forming in front of it. So this wasn't going to be a quick battle and a quick victory. Dipped them in pitch and shot them over the castle walls, volley after volley, until the town caught fire. And pretty soon after that, the town surrendered. Hey, we've won. They'd lasted so long, he's going to let them all go. So he did. It was a pitiful sight. They were allowed to leave, but only what they stood up in. This long line of people, half-starved, ill. It was a sorry sight. But we'd won. And the next thing we were going to do is we were going to march all the way back to Calais. We were going to burn and pillage everything we could find. Trouble is, we'd lost about 2,000–3,000 men due to sickness. There's some fever going around. I think it was from that lake, because all the stuff from the English camp was being washed into it. It stank. Still, before we could set off though, a French army arrived on the north bank. Bigger than us. So we couldn't go north. We couldn't go back to the boats. So we had to go east into the middle of France. Being chased, we were stopped. A bigger French army had cut the road in front of us. Much too big to go around, and we were going to have to fight. And a pitched battle like that needs a bit of preparation, so we had nearly 2 days. There were 7,000 of them, and there must have been nearly 40,000 Frenchmen. But us archers, there was about 5,000 of us, knew we could win that battle if we had enough hours. Try not to think of what was going to happen tomorrow. And this rather smart knight appeared in the firelight. He had nice new thick leather boots on, which didn't leak like ours did. And he had a nice new thick woolen cape, which wasn't sodden like ours was. And he started talking to us. He started saying what good chaps we were, how brave fighters we were, what good fighters we were, and how brave we'd been at Harfleur and all that stuff, and how brave the king was. The king. Bloody hell, as if we didn't know he was a fucking king. Still, we played along with this charade and said, we toasted ourselves and said, yeah, we're mightily good soldiers, we are, and yeah, the king's a really good chap, and we're going to follow him and do everything we want tomorrow. Silly sod. At least he seemed happy enough when he went on to bother the next group of people. After arrow at them, flights of them flying over. They looked like sparrows and starlings when they gather to fly away in the winter. Clouds of them going over. And they hit, and we could hear the points clanking on the armour, and the horses screaming as they fell over. And the men, we could see them floundering because they couldn't get up in all the mud. They're having to charge over a ploughed field with standing water in the furrows. But they kept on coming. So later on, they're having to ride round or jump over the dead in front of them. And the cavalry never got to them. Our plucky little English army had beaten this much bigger French army. We'd won. Our king was King of France. Well, for a day anyway. It hadn't occupied France for 7,000 men. But our king was evidently very pleased, didn't want to do much more, so we all went home. Sailed back to Dover, and then we got to London. And there was a big celebration. They put on a big triumphal procession. Didn't include us archers who'd won the battle for him. Just him, his knights, and to show off a few captured Frenchmen. Still, we were allowed home. Home to see your mother. All right, I won't go on about that, unless anybody else wants to hear. There's always another side to a story. There's always a story that the soldiers won't tell. Stories of fear. The fear of knowing what can happen to you the next day in battle. The fear of being chased across a foreign country by an army much bigger than you. The fear that leads you to concentrate on the very, very smallest things of camp life, just to avoid you having to think about anything. And the sounds of battle. The sounds of men and horses screaming in agony. You know, they sound like little girl Hampton's comes from, boy. Not from the army pay. Not even from the ransom we got from those few French knights we got. It was from the dead. We were allowed out after all these battles we went on. We were allowed out onto the battlefield to take what we wanted. From the dead and the dying. Didn't really matter whether they were English, French, Scottish, Spanish. We take from everything. And it didn't matter if they were dead or not. I had this knife with me. Find a slit in the visor, push it down, twist, and it wouldn't come back and change a man. There was a blackness in my soul, and there were devils inside me that wanted me to go on killing and hurting all the time. Fight for something you believe in, not for money like I did. Fight for a cause. I bought you an education with that blood money. I hope to God the mucks taught you how to tell right from wrong, truth from propaganda. Propaganda. They shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. How many Crispin's days? How many of the few? How many bands of brothers? How many more battles in the Somme Valley will it take before our leaders can do without war?